We're being invaded.
The invasion of illegal immigrants.
The fact of the matter is that this is an attempted invasion of our country.
We had all these minors from Central America flooding the border.
Multiculturalism isn't real. This is really destroying one culture and replacing it with the new foreign culture.
This is not migrants coming into the country. This is nothing short of an invasion.
Democrats who want to replace you, the American voters, with newly amnestied citizens.
This is a government-sanctioned invasion of our country.
An invasion. The New York Times is taking a deep dive into the conservative media world and found that the confessed shooter echoed many of the words of its most prominent stars. The Times found striking overlap when comparing his 2,300-word diatribe to transcripts from several shows on the right. For example, the confessed El Paso shooter complained about a Hispanic invasion of Texas. That echoes the language of Fox News hosts Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, radio talk show host Rush Limbaugh, and Ann Coulter and Jeanine Pirro's show, saying, quote, "You can shoot invaders." According to the Times, references to an immigrant invasion appeared on more than 300 different Fox News broadcasts. Joining us now, one of the New York Times reporters on that story, Jeremy Peters.
Jeremy, it's striking, the language referenced on the front page of the New York Times today and the link to the El Paso shooter. There is also a very short timeline in many instances between the number of times that these words have been used on Fox. We just saw a few instances of them. And sometimes a very short timeline between that language, that type of language, and tweets from the President of the United States directly reflecting the language.
Yeah, exactly, Mike. It's not a one-way street here. Sometimes the president's words inform Fox News hosts. Sometimes Fox News hosts' words inform the president, and he goes out and repeats them. The result is this really toxic political discourse we have, where it's now become normal to refer to immigrants, migrants, as invaders, as some type of hostile enemy force that needs to be taken out and stopped at the border, or, in the words of one pundit, maybe even shot. And how routine this has become, how common this has become, was really striking to us when we reviewed 5 years of transcripts from several news networks and radio programs, talk radio on the right, where it's not only a regular occurrence to refer to them as an invading force, but also that the motivation behind their coming here is not out to escape the horrible conditions in their homeland, but it's to replace white Americans. And that's where this intersects with the El Paso Killers manifesto. When you look at this talk of replacement, which is also startlingly common in right-wing media and has great overlap with this manifesto.
Hey, Jeremy, it's Jonathan Lemire. Obviously, the president's Twitter account and his words, and certainly Fox News, are the biggest platforms for pushing forward this type of language to describe immigrants. But talk to us a little bit more about where else you could find it. Certainly places that, you know, whether it's Breitbart or Sinclair, sort of rising outlets that have a lot of audience, particularly online, where someone like this alleged shooter in El Paso clearly spent a lot of time and posted his manifesto in the hours before opening fire.
That's exactly right, Jonathan. This is not exclusive to any one particular right-wing outlet. This was broad. This was almost across everywhere we looked on the right in media, whether it's from Sinclair, whether it's talk shows like Rush Limbaugh's, websites like the Gateway Pundit has appeared on the Drudge Report. You're talking about websites, shows, talk shows on the radio, on television, that have the potential to reach tens of millions of people a week.
Jeremy, this is Eddie. I found the article fascinating. Talk to me a little bit more about this ecosystem of hate. You're using this language of people on the right, but we know that that is a kind of spectrum. But what we're seeing is it's collapsing with this language, right? So the alt-right or white nationalists who use replacement language, and then you have Fox News using replacement language. So this is in some ways peeling the curtain back of this ecosystem of hate. It's not just simply the loud ones, it's the folks who are also mainstream. So talk a little bit more about what this means in terms of the nature of the languages of hate and fear that circulate in the country today.
That's exactly right, Eddie, because it has migrated from the fringe to the mainstream in conservative rhetoric. And the idea of this replacement, I think, is the best example of that, because that's something that originated with a white supremacist book about this supposed white genocide that could occur if migrants keep flowing into places like Europe. And what the El Paso killer did, what the killer who shot up the synagogue in Pittsburgh did, you know, they referred to this invasion, and explicitly in the El Paso killer's case referred to this idea of replacement several times, that the Hispanic race was going to replace people like him, a white guy. And you know, it's difficult to draw cause and effect, but I think you look at the language, the parallels, it's pretty striking.
You know, what's also striking, Caddy, is I mean, there's so many things that just don't make sense, just factually, when you talk about this issue and the rhetoric. Look, for instance, at the fact that illegal crossings were at a 50-year low when Donald Trump, like before Donald Trump became president of the United States, a half-century low, and yet he talks about an invasion. He talks about carnage. He has an entire campaign talking about this invasion that actually wasn't happening, that under Barack Obama, let me repeat it again, there were fewer illegal border crossings than any time over the past 50 years. And yet the USA Today did a study that showed that the president has used words like invasion and killer to discuss immigrants at rallies over 500 times. This has nothing to do with facts. The situation has gotten worse, far worse, since Donald Trump got elected president and made it worse. But that's what might suggest that this is all about racism and has very little to do with facts if you look at government statistics that the Trump administration itself keeps.
Right, we got a hint of that when he came down the escalator in 2015, right, and the kind of language he used right out of the bat when he launched his campaign against migrants. And then you cut aid to the countries where these people are coming from, make the situation there potentially worse, and you start wondering why there are more and more people coming to the border right now, and whether that's a direct result, actually, of the policies of this White House. Jeremy Peters, thanks so much for your reporting. We'll be reading more of it in the New York Times, of course, and coming up on the program, Joe Biden is doubling down on his push for background checks and a renewed ban on assault weapons. We'll read from his new op-ed and run through the latest polling on that issue. It's not even close. Morning, Joe. Back in a moment.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.